For this next question, we are going to Facebook in one of our pastor groups that I like to lurk in and steal questions from. But here's the question that someone asked. I wouldn't use AI to help me with writing a sermon, but how would you feel about using ChatGPT to summarize a sermon you have already written? The specific reason would be to post the AI summaries on our church's blog as kind of a midweek review of the sermon of the week before. I've tested this with a few sermon manuscripts, and I really feel like the outcome, it is as accurate summary of the sermon as I put it in. It even retains the exact use of scripture. Anyways, how do you feel about the use of AI in this way? And if I decide to move forward with using AI in this way, should I add this devotion was summarized from Sunday's sermon using ChatGPT? So how do we feel about this idea of using AI in this form? And is there other ways of using AI that you think would be beneficial if we believe writing sermons with AI is wrong?
I think there actually are quite a few ways that we could utilize AI. For me, time savers would be recommendation letters,
emails.
I haven't done a ton of emails, though I have dropped them into Summarize. So I've summarized longer emails. Recommendation letters are huge because I can just put the highlights from the person that I know, like they did a great job here. This letter needs to go to the National Honor Society and it needs to come from their pastor. And it does just a solid job with that. One way I've utilized it in the sermon, I did it on Sunday. It wasn't for the manuscript portion, but I dropped the scripture verse into ChatGPT and I said, will you please write short prayer prompts for me based on Luke chapter 1, verses 46 through 55. And it gave me not only short prayer prompts, as in like pray for this, then it actually gave me a liturgical prayer for each prompt. And we used all 10 of them at Lakeview Church at all 3 services yesterday. And we got great feedback we spent about 7 minutes at the tail end. We had some extra time and we spent quite a bit of time just going over some liturgical prayers thanks to ChatGPT. I was really impressed with it. I liked it a lot. It basically took the text and it broke it down into separate prayer prompts in the order of the text, which was kind of cool. So I think there's a lot of ways we could be utilizing it. I think I should probably be using it more. I just forget. Like I honestly, when I'm in Logos or I'm doing my sermon prep or I'm doing my day-to-day normal stuff, I honestly forget, I probably could have used that. My church admin had a tax law question that I wasn't sure about. I dropped the tax law question into ChatGPT and it immediately gave me the correct answer. I looked it up to double check and it was absolutely right. So lots of different uses for it for sure.
I think if you do any kind of small group discussion based on your sermon,
that's huge.
That's, hey, here's the sermon manuscript. Write me 5 discussion questions, 7 discussion questions based on this. Don't think, just to answer the question, I don't think you need to put this was summarized by ChatGPT.
No.
I think you can say, hey, this devotion was a summary of Sunday's sermon. You don't need to say it was summarized by ChatGPT.
No.
But I think if you are using ChatGPT to come up with new ideas for a sermon, that might be an issue. But using ChatGPT to expand the ideas that you already have, or to use the ideas that you have in your sermon to get into new places, I think that's exactly what it's there for.
Well, you could also
the low hanging fruit.
I'm not saying you couldn't use it to expand, because there was a time where I wanted an example from church history. So I said, I'm preaching this text. Can you give me an illustration using church history? Specifically, can it be tied into Jonathan Edwards? Because I wanted to rope him in. And it gave me a Jonathan Edwards life example that was a direct illustration to the text that I was preaching. And I would have had time to find
it. Would have taken you 3 biographies and 25 hours to find that one paragraph.
So you can get very specific, but typically when I want a church history illustration, I will ask ChatGPT and then I'll kind of confirm and look that up. But it's been pretty good about that.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add in terms of content, but I don't think there's any difference with what Andrew said about not having to say, this was by ChatGPT. Then if you're in a big church and you had an intern looking up stuff for you, you wouldn't be like, this question was provided by intern Tim. It
Not
would just
the pastor. It was an intern.
Yeah, you wouldn't say that. So I don't see why you would need to have a little, bibliography of this was by ChatGPT. It's just a summary of what you wrote. But I agree. Yeah, if you're using it to not write or to plagiarize, for sure, that's not what we're talking about. But if you're using it to expand and summarize what you've already done, I don't see any issue with it.
Frank, I got a question. What if we were to type this question into ChatGPT? Like, could ChatGPT give us more examples of how we could use ChatGPT? Any thoughts on that, Frank?
Well, actually, I did do that. And I said, my prompt was, besides writing sermons, how would a pastor use ChatGPT in the church and to help a pastor do ministry in a more efficient way? And so this is what ChatGPT spat out. Ministry communication, so it helps with email drafts. Social media content, helps you write and format newsletters. Bible studying and teaching support. So we talked about that, discussion questions, lesson summaries, which is kind of what he was using it for, and cross references and insights, which is kind of like what you were talking about with looking up for Edwards illustrations. Sermon related tasks. So this is where we're getting on the fringe of what might make people uncomfortable. Outlines and illustrations, brainstorm sermon outlines or find illustrations to emphasize the key points. Midweek devotionals and PowerPoint content. So this is where like generative AI, they can create images, which I don't think the AI is quite there yet because images still look kind of weird. But maybe the outline for those would be good. Leadership and volunteer coordination.
But we're also only 2 years in. So, I mean, 2 years ago, this technology didn't exist for anyone that wasn't paying tens of thousands of dollars for it. So think of how far ChatGPT has come in the past 2 years, and then imagine where the generative AI is going to pop up when it comes to image creation. By the time someone's listening to this podcast, who knows what's going to be
That's true.
possible.
Next week.
Here's some other ones. I do have a thought about this whole sermon issue that we've been talking about. Leadership and volunteer coordination, so meeting agendas, volunteer meetings, training material. You could probably do that. Congregational care, so follow-up notes, prayer lists, and encouragement messages. I'd be careful with the follow-up notes because it could be perceived as it being not personal. However, it says here, craft personalized templates for follow-ups with new visitors, those who need a prayer, and absentee members. And so, I like kind of what you talked about, Andrew, where you said you use ChatGPT to no, it was Tim that you talked about for like recommendation letters. That's great. Event planning and promotion. So this could be right. Event descriptions. Hey, if I was a church admin writing bulletins, I would use ChatGPT all day. Like, hey, give me a 4-sentence blurb about this event and put in the details. Like, that's a no-brainer. Promotional material, schedules, and itineraries. Yeah, it can give you a kind of an outline so you don't start from nothing. Administrative efficiency, policy drafts, minutes, summaries, job descriptions. Yeah, I would obviously look at that stuff.
I did use it for job descriptions, and it was phenomenal. A couple of tweaks and edits, but I used it for our most recent job descriptions.
I think the tweaks and edits are key. Like, you're not going to copy and paste verbatim, but it's a great jumping off point.
No, we recently hired a nursery coordinator, and I put in the prompts. It gave me, the formatting was perfect. I just kind of put in some Lakeview vernacular into it, but it cut down, I mean, I don't know, at least half an hour of what I would have spent on it. It's great.
Personal growth and study, sermon research, assist with finding Bible passage theological perspective. Again, you need to be careful with that, but I have a question about that in a second. Book summaries, that is going to be the future. There's already companies that you can pay. We talked about this at the conference, where you can get a subscription where it'll give you book summaries of these like leadership books and stuff like that. I think the moment those books get into like ChatGPT, and they're like, hey, give me the key points of what I need to find out about the book Lead, man, it's gonna be crazy.
But Frank, I mean, it's already there. My daughter was having to do some work on a few C.S. Lewis classics, and she was like, "Dad, have you read that?" And I'm like, "I have. However, if you want it summarized beautifully, just ask ChatGPT to summarize it for you." And it was flawless. It was so good. It was better than what's the old sites we used to use for our book summaries?
Cliff Notes.
It was way better than Cliff Notes. Way better.
So with all that being said, like there's a couple more suggestions, but I think this though, there is a sense, and I get it. I don't want ChatGPT to write a sermon manuscript. That I don't like the idea of it. But here's my one point of contention. Logos, I believe, is already working on using AI, that it already has its database. So if you could tell, let's say Logos has AI, and you could say, hey, here's my library in Logos of commentaries that I like. I've only selected books that fit my theological niche and all that kind of stuff. And therefore, I want to say, write a outline with some application points from this passage. And like ChatGPT, the more data you give it, like when I say ChatGPT, the other day I asked ChatGPT to help me understand something about philosophy of ministry, and it spat out the saying, because of your past of being a youth pastor and a campus pastor, let that. And I was like, how do you know that? So I asked ChatGPT, how did you know I was a youth pastor and a campus pastor? And it said to me, when I revised I used ChatGPT. I put my resume to ChatGPT to see if it can streamline to make it smaller so it could fit in the layout I used. And it read, and I looked back and it said it saved it as a memory. So that way, when I go back to it to ask another question, it knows that I used to be a campus pastor and a youth pastor. And so I was like, so with that being said, if Logos can use my commentaries, plus Logos has a way for you to store all your sermons. You like kind of write your sermons, you put it in there, and as a database of your sermons, it will learn how you write your sermons. So my question is this, is like, I still agree. Principally, I don't think we should like ask ChatGPT to write sermon manuscripts for you and then you preach from it. Because in the same way how like I'm not going to use ChatGPT to like spit out an announcement graphic and I'm just going to slap it on Sunday morning. Like there's going to be issues with that. But like my thing is like at some point ChatGPT or something like the kind of AI, if it can be tied to your commentaries that you already use and like resources that you already use, it can only become a more efficient way of your sermon prep. And if it can get you to help you think of an outline or think of a format or think of key things, I think I can say that we need to make sure we don't get too prideful and too defensive and say we should never use AI for our sermons, because I think people are already using Logos, and I'm trusting Logos to tell me what the Hebrew word of Hased means, right? I'm trusting ChatGPT in the maps and stuff like that. That's not ChatGPT, Logos and stuff like that. If I'm already trusting,
First of all, we know you got your definition of Hesed from Matt Chandler, not from Logos. Okay, so admit it.
Chandler, the guy with 3 names, Jean-Marc Comer. That's who I got it from.
Yeah.
If we're willing to use these third-party apps, third-party organizations, third-party books, if ChatGPT is learning from those same books, why would we be defensive about using that? That's my only pushback on this. With that being said, I agree. Write your own sermons, do the hard work, but like, I want to make sure that we don't become those people like 20 years ago. Pastors had their own like, hey, I'm not going to write my sermon on a computer. I need my paper and pen or whatever the old technology was. They refused to move over. I don't want to be those people. Anyways, any other thoughts about AI, guys? Because I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to fight us because of our thoughts on AI.
Well, just to kind of play the advocate of the other side, I remember my senior project in Bible college was about technology and spiritual formation. And there is some caution that you need to have of just being an early adopter. The evangelical church is classic early adopter. We just adopt everything and we sort of whitewash it in, oh, well, we can use it to reach more people and we can all those things that seem like good reasons. But one of the things I learned in that study is that the medium is the message. And so when you change the medium by which you communicate, you inherently change the message too. And so there's a number of examples, but we don't know yet the way that AI will change the way we think and the way we interact with the scriptures in the same way that, when we just adopted, the print medium, that it changed some things about the way our faith works. At the same time, as I want to say, I don't want to be, stodgy and old school. And I know guys that only they use moleskin notebooks and nice pencils to write their sermons, and they refuse to use a laptop. At the same
and they
time,
will only use paper commentaries. Why would I use an online commentary?
I can't
where I can
it.
copy and paste, where I can type out the entire paragraph
where
instead.
I can highlight things and like go back and search it. That would be crazy. It's unfair to say there's nothing to be cautious about either. To say like, I don't want to be old school. I don't want to be one of those guys who refuses to use technology. I also don't want to just adopt every new thing that comes along without thinking either. So I think that, I don't know what the issues with AI will be long-term. None of us do yet, but for sure there will be.
Totally agree. We shouldn't use it without caution. I just don't want to be so dogmatic where I would say there's nothing redeemable or usable about this. I think as these things get smarter, it's going to be interesting. And with that being said, I mean, there's news articles coming out right now of like whistleblowers talking about how ChatGPT and other AI is like going to ruin other forms of media. But like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but innovation has ruined every form of every job. You know, how many people used to work on an assembly line that now a computer is and a robot is doing it more effectively? I mean, in every industry is interrupted by technology. That there are jobs that existed 50 years ago that don't exist now. I think it's silly to think that clergy is the only industry that can not industry, but the only vocation that can never be impacted by technology. Because yes, there's always going to be people, but guess what? We can have nighttime services now because we have electric lights. You can have more than 100 people in the room because there's microphones and there's projection screens. There's air conditioning, so you can live in Florida.
Yeah.
Like, there are things that were not possible 2 generations ago that are everyday parts of life now. And I think for every single one of those innovations, there was some old stick in the mud saying this is unchristian, and those people are all dead now. And
True.
yeah, innovation, it's the Tower of Babel principle. The hammers and the clay and the bricks were not evil at the Tower of Babel. It was the intentions of the humans using those things at the Tower of Babel.
Dr. Larson, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm just saying, it's
good.
The thing that made the Tower of Babel evil was not the innovation of building a tall tower. It was people saying, we're going to do something that God doesn't want us to do.
Are you saying guns don't kill people?
I'm saying guns don't kill people.
There it is.
People with attractive daughters kill
We were all
people.
waiting on it.
I'm just saying, like, in general, like, it won't be an issue for me. I've got 4 sons. Hey, the 2 of you with all these daughters, you're the ones that are going to kill people, not me.
Well, that's true.
Because
True.
yeah, I know. It's guns don't kill people. Dads do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dr. Larson.
You guys are weird.